All right. Our guest today on the Rascanu show is Henry Silva Rojas. Henry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, man. It's a Friday afternoon. Happy for the weekend coming soon.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to speak with you. I very much appreciate all the support that you've been giving to the Real Estate TO event series that we host here in Toronto, and I've appreciated the many collaborations that we've had thus far. I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to dive a little bit into your expertise as a qualified architectural designer, some of the projects that you work on, and just give people a taste of the kind of experience that you have and the ways in which they can benefit from utilizing your services. Sounds good?
Perfect. Yeah, let's get
Oh,
started.
all right. So if we take a step back, can you share your journey into becoming a BCIN qualified architectural designer?
Yeah, to make a long story short, basically, it's the typical kind of setup where I went to school, I did the architectural technology program in Sheridan College a couple years ago, and then from there I started working from different types of firms. I started with custom homes back in 2017. Then I started doing Tim Horton renovations, and then I started working on apartment buildings on the global scale from like the UK, the US, and a bit of Canada. And then COVID happened, kind of like made everyone question a little bit on what their future will hold. And it was at that point in time that I was like, you know, I had to think of a backup plan just in case COVID actually stays and people get laid off. I should start my own sort of little business on the side. I was already doing that a couple, here and there, but I wasn't really 100%. But of course, before you kind of start on your own, you need to get qualified, and that's what I did during COVID times. Right, everything was online, so it was fairly simple for me to kind of take that information, take the tests, get passed, and then get my qualifications to become a qualified designer in Ontario. So, between that time and now, I did jump a little bit of different jobs from custom homes and then other investment projects. And then I landed myself here. We've been going strong for the last 2 years as a full time operations. I have a full team here doing like most of the drawings, and now I'm just overseeing and doing more of the high level stuff on a day to day basis. And so far, it's been pretty smooth sailing. If you ask me like today, I've been a lot more happier and a lot more free than I did 2, 3 years ago.
Oh, that's definitely the goal for most of us. So if you were to put yourself in the shoes of yourself when you were 20 years old, you're just going through school right now, or maybe you took 1 or 2 years break and you're trying to figure out exactly what career path makes sense. You seem to have an interest in real estate development, perhaps adding value in one shape or form around residential or commercial real estate. And it seems appealing to pursue the kind of career that you've pursued thus far. What are some thoughts, some tips that you might give yourself if you're looking back at when you were younger?
So I would say if I was talking to myself back then, I would say be more social, go out a little bit more, talk to people in the same sort of field that you are. Because the biggest, I guess, setback for us designers too is not finding the right kind of crowd to talk to. That's been the biggest issue from what I can tell from my fellow colleagues and new designers who are reaching out to me from LinkedIn too. Like they see what I'm doing, they contact me. I talk to them 101, but they seem to be a little bit shy to come to the group of the design teams I'm working on. But I would say definitely kind of reach out and be more social because even now, I think the biggest asset for me was being more active in the meetups, the group events, going outside to talk to real estate investors from different points of view. Because you're not talking to one investor who has the same story. Everybody has their story. Everybody comes from different places, and you can learn a lot more in like a 2 hour conversation with this group of people, right? Versus like, and I say this like a little bit hesitate, than going to school in a way, right? Because in school, I was not really that type of guy who sits down, and listen to somebody for 2, 3 hours on one boring subject. But when you talk to investors, they're very passionate. They know what they're talking about. They've actually done the project themselves, and then you start, opening your eyes a little bit more to that information, that wealth of information from them. So yeah, definitely for people who are looking to get into this sort of like my level here, my qualifications, my pathway, definitely reach out to people in your field that are very passionate about what they're talking about. And if you don't have any of that, you can feel free to reach out to me or Alex and kind of like get sorted out to the proper group to talk about this high level stuff.
All right. Well, I definitely appreciate you sharing that, really getting out of your bubble and networking with people, finding the right environment to get yourself plugged into. If you were to take this one step further and think about a specific mistake that you think you've made, whether it's a career mistake or a project-related mistake that you've worked on in the last few years, is there a specific mistake that, as you reflect back on it, you think that it has added value to you as much of an issue as you might have seen at that time, there's good that's come out of it, and it might be worth for others to know about that specific scenario.
Right. So I'm assuming you mean on the architectural field, right? Not the investor side or both?
Whatever you think has been a relatively major mistake or problem that you've had to deal with in the past, that might be of interest and would give others a taste of the kind of work that you do.
Right. So let's talk about, I guess, the biggest mistake that comes to mind is kind of being the general contractor for your own project. Personally, like for one of my properties I bought a couple years ago, I thought I was pretty confident enough in the construction side of things to kind of operate on my own, even though it was like an hour and a half drive away. It was located in Welland, south of St. Catharines. Um, but it seems like even though it was all that knowledge I had, because prior to this, I was construction manager for a firm who does all these unit conversions on a day-to-day basis. So I kind of understood the ins and outs of how that operates. So I was fairly confident at that time. But trying to commute an hour and a half while also running my business that was starting to grow was kind of a handful. And I would say that was probably my biggest mistake, not being 100% involved in my investment property, because I was paying the holding costs. I was paying everybody out of pockets. I bought this myself and it wasn't worth it. They took advantage of me. They delayed my project. They made mistakes. They didn't repair it on time. And at the end of the day, I had to find other people in that local area to kind of fix my projects. And even they were kind of not 100% great, but we still got it done. Um, and that's just been a common sort of trend I've been seeing was a lot of the investors nowadays buying properties that are like an hour or two away, and they're scared of this same situation I went through
Mm,
of having a contractor kind of screw them over for 2 hours away because they can go and rush and fix it up. It's a completely different sort of environment there.
hmm,
But yeah, that would be my biggest mistake. But today, now that it's being completed, I'm never going to make that mistake again. And I like to have my properties a little bit more closer to home in a way.
mm,
I know that's going to restrict me a lot more, but at least that way I'm more confident that's going to be completed on the proper schedule and with the right people.
mm. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that specific example. I think it's helpful advice that you're giving, and so that might have been a trigger uh, that really caused you to choose to specialize in providing architectural and building permit services to investors. That is the niche that you're focusing on right now. Can you expand on that? Why you chose to focus on serving investors and specifically, what are the exact services that you provide?
Right. So I guess when I first started going on my own, I already had a list of clients that did custom homes, house additions, garage additions, whichever it is, more focused on the homeowner than investors. But then as I started becoming more of a real estate investor over the last few years, I started talking to investors. I started to understand their mindset. It's completely different from a homeowner, which wants it to be perfect. They needed to get to be like 90, 95% done for rental purposes. It's a completely different animal, you could call it in a way. The renovations are different. The designs are a lot different. Everything is a lot more money focused and making sure it's on budgets. That's the whole idea of it. And I love that sort of perspective too, just because in my career designing things like custom homes and house additions for homeowners, we've had projects that take up like 6 months to a year to 2 years just to finalize on design. Not even the permit process, but I'm not the type of guy who kind of wants to keep something within me, like within like a year or two. I want to get the job out done sooner, faster, and professionally. And that's where it seems like the real estate investor and myself kind of align properly. So in that situation, as soon as I start growing out my real estate kind of knowledge and social activities, so that all of our clients kind of raise up to that level as well. So we started getting more involved with them in their networking events. In terms of our services, we do like from the start to finish in terms of design. So what we do is we go on site, we measure everything, we prepare the existing drawings, the designs, the permit sets, we coordinate with engineers, and then we submit for permits on your behalf. Basically, we're like your project managers until you receive the issue permit at that point. Now, as of today, we've gone a little bit more zoning specific in the last couple of months, where investors before they buy their property, they do reach out to me asking me for my feedback on what's the highest and best use for this property. And obviously, anybody can look into the zone in. It's not a professional that needs to look into it, right? Anybody can type in City of Hamilton, City of Toronto, zoning interactive map, find the zoning, and then read through that 500-page document, which you can imagine not a lot of people want to do too much. But it's also trying to find the fine print into specifics uses. You know, we've had a situation before. We're going a little off topic, but just for your listeners here, but we've had situations before where you're allowed to do, you know, A, B, or C, but then the fine print here says you can do it, but then you have to raise up the level to like 3 feet higher than the sidewalk. But by that logic, now you only have 5 feet of height for your new units, so you cannot do that like building code wise. So that kind of screwed up the deal for one of my investors a couple months ago. And it's just reading the fine print. That's what it is, right? So having me to kind of take a second look at it definitely helps them understand, okay, we read everything as much as possible. I think we're fairly confident to buy this building or at least make an offer to buy this building, right? I know we chatted a little bit off, before the interview here about one of my situations a couple weeks ago where it's a weekend, it's a Saturday afternoon, and then I get a call from one of my investor buddies from a couple months ago. He called me because he was urgent. He needed somebody to kind of look into the zoning. And even we did a FaceTime actually. We did a FaceTime for the building he was looking at. It was completely vacant. We had to look into it. He was showing me how many units can we do, what's the potential for this property. And after 2 hours on the phone while I'm shopping with a couple of my other buddies, we kind of narrowed down what he can do for that property and what he should be looking at for offer and potential offer cost basically for that building. So it definitely helps them kind of get that offer in as quickly as possible, making sure they lock it in and do their due diligence. So that's pretty much our services as of now.
Okay, that's really helpful. So speaking of highest and best use, imagine that someone who owns a detached home in the beach neighborhood in Toronto, or somebody who owns a semi-detached home that has a separate basement suite and has a fairly deep backyard in another part of the city, say in the Junction. And then there's another person who maybe owns, a fourplex in Scarborough. You know, there's all these different scenarios that you face as somebody comes to you and asks for the highest and best use. What would you say is the process that you follow to help someone understand what would be the ideal scenario? What are the things that they should be paying attention to in order for them to be able to maximize the use of the property that they are currently owning? Let's imagine that they currently own this specific asset.
Right. So like how I usually go my process is trying to understand their budgets. Every investor is a little bit different in terms of their expertise and their level, right? We have some of the newer investors coming in from like the COVID's time where they've only have a one or two properties and they're looking to kind of make sure it's budget friendly and they don't have too much of a capital versus some of the capital companies I work with, they can do whatever they want as long as the numbers make sense, right? So in that situation, as soon as I understand their kind of like background there and understand their budgets, then I can kind of advise them a little bit better on the property itself because everybody wants to know the highest and best use. And it's always going to be the same situation. You could tear it down and build like a brand new apartment building in some areas, right? You know, you are allowed to have 5 units right now from the Toronto's like May zoning changes that happened this year. So you can have 4 units in the property plus like the ADU on the backside, and everybody wants to do that, but sometimes the building shell does not make sense for that sort of conversion. So I tell them you could just tear it down and build new just to make sure the building shell makes sense, but then that's more cost. you're basically building a brand new custom home at that point. And honestly, with construction rates the way they are now, they're a lot more pricier than ever before. So that wouldn't be wise for me to kind of advise them to do. It'd be great for me because I get the project and I can, quote as, as that level, but that's not who I am. I want to be sure I can help my investors understand the highest and best use for their budget. So if they can only afford to do, interior alterations, sure, let's do interior alterations. I'm more than happy to work with you there. That still provides the highest and best use for your budgets. So it helps them understand, okay, we can do that, or separate them in phases. Sometimes we'll do a duplex conversion and then do a triplex conversion afterwards, while we're also working on the ADU for future use in like 1 or 2 years. So at least that way they can appropriate their budgets and refinance and get the money back out to reuse for the same property.
Very interesting. Thank you. One specific point that you made earlier was around the rezoning process and how you're more deeply specializing in that. How would you compare the rezoning process if someone um, owns a property or is looking to own a property in Toronto versus Mississauga versus Hamilton? What are some top level differences that you're noticing when someone is trying to go through a rezoning process?
Oh, it's a hellhole for myself. It's honestly not the easiest application to go through. What we tell some of our investors is like, let's look for a minor variance committee of adjustments type of situation. Because again, the thing we're asking for the city is like very minor in nature. If you're looking to rezone the entire property from like it's only allowed to do three units, right? Because of Bill 23, but you want to add 6 or 7 or 8 units, it's possible. Will the city support it? It depends on the neighborhood, right? Every city is a little bit different. Every neighborhood's a little bit different if they'll support it. What I tell them to do is like, team up with a local planner in that area, because they would know 100% what that neighborhood is like and what they forecast the neighborhood would be like in like 5, 10, 15 years from now, right? So can they? It's like a lawyer. Well, like they have to fight against the city. They have to make their case. They have to prove that the area is well suited to have an increase in density, right? So, but if I compare it to city, they're all the same process. It's just more of like what the neighborhood entails in that area. If there's any new transit that's coming into that area, it's definitely going to help us kind of prove that we don't need too much parking. We can increase the density without increasing parking. That seems to be the biggest kind of setback when it comes to these planning applications. For example, like Taco and I were working on a building right now in St. Catharines. We are going through the planning process. It's a site plan approval. It's not really a rezoning for now, but it's similar in nature in a way that we're asking for them for about 12 units, right? From this single lot that was 5 units, and then we merged it with a second lot beside it, and now we're trying to build a brand new apartment building that's 12 units. It's been a painful event, I can say that for sure, because we're about 2 years since we started the process. So anybody interested to do site plan approval or rezoning, get comfortable because it isn't going away anytime soon. There's so many people at the city involved in the project. They have to look at the water, electrical, they have to look at the parking, the landscaping, the heights, the neighborhood, heritage. There's so many little things, and you have to get
Yeah,
approval from all of them. So it's not a simple process. It's not for the faint of heart here. So and we started this 2 years ago. We're almost at the finish line, but you never know what pops up. So
yeah.
that's my point of view there.
Thank you. If we're looking at the minor variance process that you're noticing and the differences that you're noticing between Toronto, Mississauga, and Hamilton, are there any additional thoughts that you would have on that? So minor variance only.
Yeah, so we're just talking about minor variants. I think the biggest difference is the timing. A lot of cities have quick turnarounds um, when it comes to their minor variance hearing. Like for city of Hamilton, I can guarantee like they're about 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, they do minor variance applications. Does that mean that your application will go through in 2 weeks from now? No, because everyone else, it's like a line, right? But at least they're kind of on top of that, and they do hearings every 2 weeks. Versus some cities, I think it was Cambridge I was working on a couple months ago. It was like every 2 months at the time, right? So, if you make the short list, then yeah, you can get your application in 2 months. But if you don't, you miss that deadline, then you just push back to another 2 more months. So that seems to be sort of the big difference in some cities where they always have it or they don't have it as often as the other ones. And that could really slow down your investment property and especially holding costs because now you got to hold it for like 2 to 4 more months and pay that price of just waiting for the city.
Thank you. If you were to reflect on a specific project that you're really proud of, that you've worked on in the last couple of years, is there one that you might be able to paint a picture of, one specific project that you've delivered?
So we just completed, I say just, but it's been like maybe 6 months, give or take, project down in Welland, where we took about 12 unit apartment building and split like a lot of the units into about multiple units. So basically, from 12 unit existing to a 17 unit apartment building. That's what we did. Um, and honestly, I can say I'm pretty proud of that project just because it was a lot of headache at the start, but as we gone through the whole project itself, piece by piece, we were able to get it completed. And now today we have 17 brand new units because over time, some tenants left and some tenants stayed, but whatever ones left, we kind of renovate them. So majority of the building is renovated and up to date to today's standards. And it's great because it was kind of a less headache than like some of the bigger cities would have given us versus some of the tiny cities that are just, they want development. So the city was pretty friendly to us in that whole endeavor there. So I would say that's pretty one of our biggest top three, I would say, projects that we've completed and I'm very proud to say that it's done.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Henry. Henry, if someone has any questions about what we've discussed just now, if they just want to start following you and the work that you're doing, how can they connect?
So the best way to kind of reach out to me is definitely through Instagram. I'm so active there. I'm almost 24/7 at that point, and it's just me. So it's not like I have somebody doing it for me. You can reach out to me on Instagram at Rojas, Rojas Empire. And anytime you have a question, feel free to reach out. My number is there too. Happy to get on a call, or again, in any of the networking events I go to, I'm going to forward them before Christmas anyway. So I'm sure I'll meet some new investors at that time. And it's great to have an in-person chat just because you put a face in a name.
Awesome. Henry Silva Rojas, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Rascanu Show.
Thank you. I appreciate it and hope to chat with you soon.
Sounds good. Take care.